diploma. And he has in the Computer Science Club and a National Science Bowl team, as well as captain of the MIT Zero Robotics team. And he is founder of several nonprofit organizations, including the New York chapter of Kids Are Scientists Too. He started his original science research in the 5th grade and has so far published 3 papers as leading author and applied for 1 patent. He has a broad interest in the areas of electrical engineering and computer science. He joined the IEEE as a student member in March, and he plans to attend college and major in electrical engineering and computer science. So please join me in welcoming David Lee. David?
Thank you so much for the introduction. It's a pleasure. Yeah, I'm very honored to present a prototype that I developed to track at-home medical equipment during natural disasters, which is I developed independently over the course of about a year. So many patients' lives are dependent on electrical durable medical equipment, DME for short, and these are simply life support systems used by the patient at home that include ventilators, dialysis machines, oxygen concentrators, etc. In fact, the World Health Organization in 2013 has estimated that in Japan alone, there are as many as 13,000 people who rely on durable medical equipment every day. Now, there's obviously a benefit to them in that they're economical and also convenient for patients to use at home. However, there's also a very huge health risk that these devices pose in their susceptibility to power outages. In fact, a study done in 2011 showed that most medical devices are only able to last for at most 3 hours off their internal battery without any power. So thus, during a natural disaster, it's imperative that patients, during a power outage in general, it's imperative that patients seek better care at a local hospital. But during natural disasters, these hospitals are often backlogged by other patients who have similar needs. Thus, there needs to be a system to report critical patient information and patient location to a local hospital so the hospital can better prioritize which patients to admit and also locate the patient faster. Now, in fact, knowing of this problem, the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services actually cited this problem on their partner site, Innocentive.com, about 1 year after aftermath of Hurricane Sandy, and this their problem that they posted is what inspired me to pursue it. Now, there are some current devices that are designed to report information and attempt to solve this problem, including some commercial solutions and also some newer DME that have built-in devices to periodically report patient information back to a local hospital. However, all these devices rely on current infrastructure, such as cell towers or landlines, which by their nature are vulnerable to natural disasters and thus are unsuitable for their purpose during natural disasters. My solution, on the other hand, solves this problem without the need of any current infrastructure. It is composed of these radio modules, which in my investigation I call user nodes, one connected to each patient's DME in their houses. And these user nodes form a radio ad hoc network amongst each other, whereby each node is able to relay the information from nearby nodes, thus effectively extending the range of all the user nodes. Now, whenever one of these user nodes detects a power outage at a particular location, it starts sending out the patient information that is encrypted with a key preset by the hospital. And this information travels through the network until it reaches another radio device, which in my investigation I call the base station, located physically within the hospital, whose sole purpose is to collect all the information in the network and print them out to a hospital computer where it is decrypted and displayed to the hospital personnel. Now, some constraints in my invention is that the time it takes for information to get from one user node ultimately to the base station has to be reasonably low. And also, these user nodes have to last sufficiently long without AC power during a power outage off of their internal batteries. In addition, my implementation has to be scalable and also cost-effective. So in order to make my proposed solution a reality, I first did a little mock-up of my hardware to see how it would be like. And then I first started out with designing the software. Now, in order to achieve the relaying of information from one node to the other, I did an original implementation of a known routing protocol, a very basic one known as the most forward within radius, which is a greedy routing protocol. And in order to do that, I first defined 3 data structures in the CNAME: the request packet, reply packet, and the data packet, with the data packet containing the main payload of the encrypted patient data. Then I implemented the algorithm. Now, how this protocol works is that whenever there is a user node that needs to send out information, either if it's itself in danger or needs to relay information from other nodes, it starts broadcasting the request packets that contain its radio address, its unique radio address. And then the nodes that receive this then unicast back the reply packets containing their location and also their radio ID. And from these reply packets, and in particular the location information contained within them, the original node chooses the next node such that it minimizes the local distance to the hospital and then sends over the data packet to that node through unicasting. And this happens again and again until that data packet reaches the hospital, where it's displayed to hospital personnel. And then in order to support my software, I then designed the hardware. Now, originally my hardware consisted of an Arduino microcontroller and also a modified two-way radio. However, as my software design evolved, so did my hardware design. This is the current hardware design for one user node, and it consists of a GPS receiver to obtain the location of the patient. And for communication between these devices, I use an XP module, which is a small low-power radio device that implements the IEEE 801.15.4 protocol, and is able to at low powers and low distances both unicast and broadcast information, and can respond to has a command line like interface to interface with my microcontroller. A power source to be able to power this device without any AC power, and also which contains an internal battery. And this is all connected to a central microcontroller, which in my case I used a TZ brand 3.1 microcontroller. And now all these devices are, all the peripherals, the GPS module and also the XP radio, are connected to this microcontroller through a synchronous serial interface. Now, to test the effectiveness of my routing algorithm and also my device on a small scale, I first set up 5 user nodes. I built 5 user nodes and 1 base station and loaded the software onto each of these devices. Then I lined them up linearly such that they are each 90 meters apart, just far enough that I tested that each node is only able to listen to its immediate neighbor. And then I simulated a power outage on the node furthest away from the base station to see if that information can hop through the intermediate nodes and get to that base station. And in order to quantify exactly how long it takes for information to get from one node to the next, I took advantage of a feature in the GPS module, which is the UTC time feature. It's able to obtain the UTC time of that when it's being called, and from that I was able to interpolate and synchronize all the devices to a certain time. And thus, I was able to extend these data structures to incorporate a timestamp. Thus, I was able to find out that it takes approximately 20.135 seconds for information to get from one node to the next. Now, this shows not only is my my hop time reasonable, but also suggests the scalability of my software design, because I was able to expand these data structures without having to modify any other piece of software. So after I showed that my routing works on a small scale, the next logical step is to take it on a large scale. However, for the sake of making it practical in terms of time and money, rather than building literally hundreds of these user nodes, physical user nodes, I instead implemented the aforementioned algorithm in a program that I wrote in a C language to simulate an entire network of these user nodes. Now, you may have noticed that the current radio range of these user nodes is a little too short for practical use. So I wanted to know, in real life, how long of a radio range is needed to reliably be able to find a path through the network from any user node to that hospital. Thus, I made my simulation calculate packet delivery ratio, or the probability that information can get from one node to the base station, based on 3 parameters. Firstly, the distance from the origin node to the base station, which I set as a constant of 8 kilometers, according to a study by 2007, as a typical distance from a patient to his nearest hospital. And secondly, the radio range of each user node, which I set as my independent variable that I varied from 1 to 8 kilometers. And thirdly, patient population density, or how many DME there are per square kilometer. And I tested a high, medium, and low density demographic. This is my resulting packet delivery ratio versus radio range for the 3 situations of high, medium, and low density situations. I then found an equation to model this data. And this chart shows for, let's say, a region with 1 patient per square kilometer. In order to reach a 99% packet delivery ratio, each user node would need to have a radio range of 4.7 kilometers. Now this shows effectiveness of my routing protocol because rather than having to transmit all 8 kilometers directly to the hospital, each node would only have to have a radio range of 4.7 kilometers. So thus, this routing protocol is able to effectively reduce the radio range that's necessary. The third test that I conducted was to test how much power is consumed by the user node in the house. So I designed this little test rig here consisting of an Arduino microcontroller that acts as a data logger while my device was running. And as a load resistor here, it's composed of 9 1-ohm resistors combined in series and parallel, and that's to find an average value of these resistors to lower the probability that the drift from the average value. So this is my resulting power versus time graphs that I was able to calculate for when the device was relaying patient information, when it was obtaining GPS data, and also when it was just idle over here. And from this, I calculated that with the energy contained in an AA battery, it would last for around 5.8 hours theoretically. And with the energy contained in a more realistic battery, such as one you might find in a wheelchair or a car battery, it would last for around 6 days without any AC power. In conclusion, I successfully designed a proof of concept device that meets all the constraints that I said before. And as an inexpensive solution, it has the potential to save many lives by providing the critical communication link between patient and hospital. And this device is scalable to radios with higher output power for greater transmission range, and also is applicable for different locations with different demographics. In addition, I implemented the software so that the algorithm can be easily optimized. That being said, in the future, I could further develop my prototype by changing the hardware, let's say, using a larger elevated omnidirectional antenna, and also more powerful radio transmitter. And also in terms of software, I can discover different routing protocols. I can test different routing protocols to see which one is the most optimized for the situation. And in terms of regulation, there is actually a band that the FCC allocates especially for medical devices, around 1.4 gigahertz range. And I could potentially obtain licenses and operate off of that band. Now, I would really like to thank Ms. Offerman Salentano, who is in the audience right here, who is my science research, who's the science department chair at Commack High School, and also my research teachers, Mr. Richard Kurtz and Dr. Lorraine Solomon, for their support. And also, I would like to thank Drs. Barbara and Fred Kruger of IEEE, Dr. Kruger is standing here, and Professor Xing Wang and Mr. Jose Cordova of Stony Brook University, and Dr. Stephen Hartman of Sterling Medical Devices for the helpful discussions and their support. These are my references. Thank you very much for listening.
Any questions for David?
Jessica.
How would you deal with in an urban environment with tall buildings? That the building wouldn't block your transmission?
Obviously, the current radio range is assuming no interference with no obstructions and a direct line transmission. However, what can be used is an elevated and omnidirectional antenna that can allow the information to go even if there is obstructions, and also potentially operating at a longer wavelength so that so the diffraction can be greater.
Any other questions for David?
All right, great. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.